Number 16 nationally, and the highest rated talk show hosted by an African American on the 2025 Talkers Heavy 100 list of the most important talk radio hosts in the nation. Last year, Tavis ranked number 33, and the year before, number 45. The Tavis Smiley Show has rapidly expanded its national syndication to now include nearly 50 radio stations across the country and counting. Congratulations, Tavis.
Yeah. Keep on. Never say die. Keep on. Like this. Keep on. Never say die. Keep on. Like this. Never say die. Never say die.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai, your host and White House correspondent right here in LA today, joining you in afternoon drive time. Thanks for riding with your brother. I'm in touch, and so you be in touch. Be sure to follow me on all the social media platforms at Dr. Nii-Quartelai. Just type in Dr. Nii-Q, DRNIIQ, and there I am, fresh for you to follow. If you haven't already, download the KBLA app and subscribe to A More Perfect Union podcast. That way you'll never miss an episode. If you're in Washington, D.C., 3 days away from the We Are All D.C. action, Saturday, September 6th at 11 a.m. at Malcolm X Park. Be there or be square. You can go to the Free DC Project. That's Free DC Project. You can go to their Instagram page and click on the link to register, organize your crew, and join this national event to demand an end to DC's occupation. And so that is your friendly announcement there. Now it's time for your national news roundup. It's time for you to decide the good, bad, and ugly headlines of the day. Kicking us off, NPR is reporting that President Trump is floating this idea of deploying the National Guard troops to New Orleans now. That's right. President Trump said that his administration is considering whether to deploy the National Guard troops to Chicago or a city with a governor who says he would welcome them, like New Orleans. Illinois Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker has objected to the potential deployment of troops in the state. Louisiana has a Republican governor, Jeff Landry, who posted on X following Trump's comments saying that he would take the president's help from New Orleans to Shreveport. You all might remember speaking from the Oval Office today, Trump said in Louisiana, quotes, "We have a great governor, Jeff Landry, who wants us to come in and strengthen and straighten out a very nice section of his this country that's become quite tough, quite bad." That's what he said. Trump also floated sending the National Guard to New York and Baltimore. He noted that Democratic governors' opposition to those various cities and argue that politicians are not in tune with the people. Well, some might say it looks like Democratic governors standing up and knowing their rights. And looks like, at least for now, that sending the National Guard to Chicago doesn't look like Trump is itching for that fight quite yet. But that's not stopping the Trump administration when it comes to Project 2025. You see, the group behind Project 2025, they want a Manhattan Project for more babies. NPR is also reporting this, that the conservative group behind Project 2025's governing playbook for President Trump's second term, they're set to propose sweeping revisions to U.S. economic policy meant to encourage married heterosexual couples to have more children. The Heritage Foundation, a right-wing think tank headquartered just a stone's throw from the U.S. Capitol, wants lawmakers to create new government-seeded savings accounts for married people only. It hopes to steer funding for childcare away from programs like Head Start, and towards individual families, specifically to encourage parents to stay home and rear their children. What in the Handmaid's Tales is this? And the group wants Trump to issue executive orders requiring all proposed policies and regulations to, quote, measure their positive or negative impacts on marriage and family, then overhaul or end programs that score 3. Now, remember during the election, you have folks out there talking about white replacement theory. Remember that? Well, what's this about? Because if there's not some white replacement theory that is driving this or undergirding this, it's adjacent to this. Those ideas are a part of a 5-page executive summary of a forthcoming Heritage position paper titled, quote, "We must save the American family." Wonder which family that is. It calls for a Manhattan Project to restore the nuclear family and induce couples to have more babies. A copy of the summary was obtained by folks over at the Washington Post. When we come forward, we're switching gears and we're talking to one of my favorite colleagues, Trymaine Lee. He is an MSNBC correspondent and author of a new book that comes out September 9th. We're going to tell you all about that and more. You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. Trymaine Lee, when we come forward.
You're listening to A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Ron had a tax problem he just couldn't handle on his own.
I owed the IRS taxes for over 5 years, but I didn't have any money to pay the taxes.
Those years cost him dearly.
Most of it was fees and interest. It was horrible.
Ron finally called in the pros.
I called Optima Tax Relief, and boy, am I happy I did.
The leading tax resolution firm, Optima, is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau. They've resolved over $1 billion for their clients. Ron was overjoyed.
They settled my account with IRS. I was ecstatic. They are a lifesaver. They are. I am so happy.
Take Ron's advice and call Optima now for a free consultation.
Yeah, don't do like I did and wait. Call Optima Tax Relief. Do it now. You'll be ecstatic like me.
Call 800-919-9077. 800-919-9077. 800-919-9077.
Optima Tax Relief.
Testimonial from an actual client. Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai. Let's preserve Black land stories before they're lost forever. I want to personally invite you to be a part of something historic. As journalist in residence for the Black Land Lost Narrative Archive Project, I've joined forces with powerhouse attorney and social justice champion George Fothery, the man who helped make history by delivering justice to the Bruce family in Manhattan Beach, securing the first known return of land unjustly taken from Black owners by a local government. That victory was monumental, but it was just the beginning. For generations, Black families have acquired land through grit, faith, and determination, only to lose it through violence, legal loopholes, forced sales, and systematic racism. What's been taken goes far beyond dirt and deeds. It's the erasure of wealth, identity, and legacy. That's why we've launched the Black Land Lost Narrative Archive Project, a national effort to collect, protect, and preserve the stories of Black land lost before they're buried, forgotten, or erased altogether. Because there's power in telling Black stories, there is resistance in remembering, and there's justice in being seen and heard. This is where you come in. We're inviting you to be a part of this historic Black narrative archive. If you or someone you know has experienced land loss, displacement, or forced property sales, your story deserves to be heard and remembered. Your story belongs in this archive. Your truth matters not just to your family, but to our collective future. Visit blacklandlost.org today. Fill out our simple intake form and add your voice to the National Archive of Remembrance, Resilience, and Reckoning. Let's make these stories live on, not in whispers, but on the record. With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai, and as always, we welcome your feedback.
We have no permanent friends or permanent enemies. Only permanent interests as we effort to build a more perfect union.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai and thrilled to welcome my friend, my brother, Trymaine Lee, Pulitzer Prize and Emmy Award-winning journalist. He's an MSNBC contributor, known for his really searing and dynamic reporting at the intersection of race, justice, and democracy. As host of MSNBC's Into America podcast, he's earned a Webby Award, 4 Signal Awards, and multiple NAACP award nominations. And now he has his new book out. It's called 1,000 Ways to Die. He also has a documentary series out called Hope in High Water, which continues his legacy of telling urgent, deeply personal stories rooted in American truth. Please welcome to the show, Trymaine Lee.
Dr. Nii-Quartelai, my brother, thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's always a delight to have you here with us. You have produced work yet again that meets the moment. Let's first start off by talking about this book that is coming out September 9th. We want to urge all of our leaders, learners, and listeners to pick it up and to visit you on tour across the country. It's still available on pre-order right now. But for folks who are less familiar, what is 1,000 Ways to Die about, and why is it your most personal work yet?
You know, 1,000 Ways to Die in some pretty real ways is my life story and my life's work. It's been 10 years in the actual making. It took me 10 years to write and finally publish. But really, it took my entire life to get to this moment. In 2015, 10 years ago, I was writing a book about the true cost of gun violence in the country in terms of actual dollars, right? I figured if people don't care about the young brother in Philly or the south side of Chicago or in LA, maybe they care that every time a bullet hits flesh, we're all paying a price, an actual price. It was a cynical approach, but that was my way to rope folks in to speak to the cost that our communities pay every single day for gun violence. And then in 2017, I had a heart attack, a massive heart attack, and almost lost my own life. And in grappling with what it meant to have death crushing down on me, my daughter, who was 6 years old at the time, asked me, like, Daddy, how and why, what happened? And to be honest, I had to dig deep into what I was actually carrying in my heart. A lifetime, a career of speaking to Black death and survival. We are on the heels of Trayvon and Michael Brown and Freddie Gray and Eric Garner, carrying those things, but also had to go back a century of gun violence in my family, going back to the Jim Crow South. And so this story really is about the violence of the trigger, the violence of the gun, but also the systemic violence that is a prerequisite long before a trigger is ever pulled. And so it's not just about, guns and bullets. It's about segregation and redlining and white supremacy, all those things that create the ecosystem for gun violence to flourish in our communities and the industry, right? As they're stoking fear of Black violence, the industry is getting rich. And so how those guns are pumped into society. And so, again, it's deeply personal. It's my most personal work to this day. But I feel like it's as urgent and necessary now as it was 10 years ago when I started.
I mean, before I returned to journalism, when I worked in public affairs, I remember coming upon this theory, the weathering theory, this idea that there are a number of social and political issues that over time, whether they wear us down.
That's right.
We internalize so many of these issues. When folks out there talk about racism being a public health issue, oftentimes this is one of the theories that they are drawing on to make that case. It seems to me that this story, this story, 1,000 Ways to Die, it really puts a face on this weathering theory, no?
Oh, no, you're perfectly right. I mean, think about Black folks are getting less sleep because of the stress that we carry. Less sleep leads to a slew of other health conditions. The idea that we're walking around bound up with all this anxiety, with nowhere to kind of diffuse that kind of tension in our bodies and anxiety. And so what we carry within us, I like to say in the book, a blood clot and a bullet are very different things, but both can twist and shatter a life, right? And so what we're carrying, that weathering is perfect. We deal with it in the small ways at work, in the big ways in our community. But the violence isn't just, from our neighbors. It's from the police. It's the violence of hunger. That, again, that's one of the biggest obscenities to me in this country. The idea that we are hungry. It's the violence of lack of access to quality healthcare, or the water that we drink, or the air that we breathe. And so all of that, those layers upon layers, create this kind of cacophony of violence that undoes us.
Yeah, and this book, it really brilliantly weaves together three pillars: the violent history of guns and Black life. I was just thinking about this earlier, because there's so many leaders in our community that have died in gun violence, right? I mean, August 28th, so many of us might have been, reflecting on the March on Washington and what that meant at that time, what that continues to mean. But I can't think about the March on Washington and think, wow, one of the principal voices from that experience that shaped American history was also the victim of gun violence, Martin Luther King Jr.
Without question. I mean, but the violence, specifically gun violence, is what undergirds this entire system. It's what holds it together. It's always been the actual violence and the threat of violence that has allowed white supremacists to maintain this kind of racially stratified society from the very beginning. I mean, when you think about the braiding of Black life and death and the gun, it goes back to the very beginning. And I talk about this in the book, and it was one of those sections that I had to truncate because I would have just spent the whole book telling this story. When we think about enslaved people, I think we were all taught, and we tend to believe, that enslaved people were some natural byproducts of whatever was happening in Africa, and that the Europeans just came and just exploited this opportunity to provide this kind of labor for the Western world, the emerging world in the West. But there was something called the guns for slaves cycle. Whereas gun technology was rising, Europeans were applying regional powers in Africa to foment and create more instability and more war, to create more enslaved people. And we see, as the gunpowder is rising, the shipments of gunpowder going to West Africa, the so-called slave coast, and guns are being shipped over, we see the massive increase of enslaved people being shipped over. And so it was no accident. It wasn't as if, there just happened to be this war, and then, no, they were creating that. And some European countries would only trade in weapons for humans. So there's this psychic residue of the gun on Black flesh, that we were forced out of Mother Africa with a muzzle of a gun at our back. And here we are, greeted in the hell of the Western world with more guns, more white men with guns. And so that braiding together, so then we jump all those generations of violence and bloodshed to where we get Dr. King and Martin Luther King and JFK and all of those leaders, right? You think about Medgar Evers, right? You think about everything that was happening in this country related to the gun, but we were bound with, because this system has bound us to it, right? So it's the violence runs deep, but it's I think when we unpack the layers, none of this is by accident. And I think one of my biggest points in all of this, not unlike my other work, is that ain't nothing wrong with us. We didn't drop out of the sky as some other kind of creature that's violent, innately violent creature. No, and we can't be defined by the violence heaped against us and our responses to that.
Trymaine, just as you lay that out, I'm thinking about yesterday's press conference in Chicago with Governor Pritzker and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. The Chicago mayor, in my view, sort of really met the moment during that press conference and reframed the terms of the debate. You might remember that President Trump, had said from the Oval Office that he intends to send the National Guard into Chicago, into Illinois, not saying when or where, but says he intends to do that. Mayor Brandon Johnson said that, Chicago doesn't have an immigration problem. Chicago has a gun problem. And he did not hold back in helping people to understand that a lot of these illegal guns, 24,000 illegal guns since he became mayor of Chicago, have come into the city through red states, through Indiana, through Mississippi. And so he said, if the president is feeling froggy and wants to do something, fund ATF, work with those red state governors, the gun trafficking, that is fueling some of the gun violence that we're seeing in places like Chicago. it seems to me you can draw a direct line between what's happening today in Chicago and what happened back on the motherland.
You know, first of all, it's kind of to your point. We've all been watching this video of this military strike on this Venezuelan gunboat in international waters. If you really wanted, if you care so much, you want to intercept things en route, there is no better place to start than what they call the iron pipeline between Mississippi and Chicago. Given the Swiss cheese nature of our gun laws in this country, where you have some states with uber super loose gun laws and others with more restrictive gun laws, and there's an historical tie and a straight geographic tie going straight from the South right into Chicago. But I also can't help but think about how the fall of Reconstruction was sparked when federal troops left the South and let white folks return to the default position and baseline. And now you have federal troops returning to communities that were created because Black folks fled the South in the wake of that destruction. I can't help but see the parallels there. But to kind of to your point, if the administration was serious about intercepting guns, they know where to start. It's Mississippi, it's Georgia, it's South Carolina, but they like to use Chicago as a poster child, saying, look at those strict gun laws, and they stuff all those guns, as if we're just in this naive universe, right? They know what the deal is. I think they know it. But I also note in the book that the modern gun rights movement, the one that we recognize today, the NRA and these other organizations, were a direct response to Brown v. Board of Education in 1954. As Black folks are trying to achieve the fullness of this American citizenship, that sparked fear and concern. So those gun rights folks and the white supremacist organizations and the community councils and citizens councils said, this is how we need to protect ourselves. This is how we need to arm ourselves against this wave of uppity free Negroes. And so it's all bound together, brother.
It is bound together. It's bound together. There are a number of folks out there that are calling your book both a memorial and a mirror. What do you think they mean by that?
It's a memorial because I want folks to know that we are not what we've experienced. And I think the greatest pain of gun violence is because we know the potential that is lost and stolen from gun violence, the hopes and the dreams, the desires lost for our fullness, right? And so I think it's a memorial in memorializing all who've lost someone. And I've lost countless folks in my own family. My grandfather was murdered in 1976. The first person in my family to be murdered was my grandmother's brother in 1922 in rural Dodge County, Georgia, right? Ben Hill County, Georgia, in a sundown town. And then again in the 1950s by a state trooper. Then my grandfather in 1976, my stepbrother murdered in Camden in 1996, my cousin in Atlantic City in the early 2000s. So we've all lost. But what we've lost is more than just our loved ones. There's this chilling that keeps us bound. As long as we have to be concerned of the violence of the gun, right? From those in our communities who are responding to the deprivation or whatever it is, and responding to the state, it keeps us chilled. But it's a memorial, but it's also a mirror of the great violence this society, this culture has heaped upon Black folks, but also the violence that's braided into the fabric of this place. Lest we look at these mass shootings, right? Let alone the shootings that happened during the weekend in New Orleans or Chicago. And so again, it's the aim is to put some respect on our community's name for all the blood that's been spilled, but also remind this country of what it truly is and its failed promises and its hypocrisy and how it's always used Black bodies as fodder, right? They can point to, we're going to DC, we're going to Chicago because our bodies have been fodder. And there's this public spectacle of Black violence and death that we've been accustomed to. And so I hope, as much as I'm shining a light in a very dark place here, I hope it does amplify the love of community, that we have everything within us to keep pushing forward. We shouldn't have to keep bending and pushing, but we have to. So it's a special book, man. And again, it's heavy. It's not light, but hopefully folks see the strength in themselves in that mirror, but also that folks aren't alone. That even your friendly neighborhood reporter has experienced this. And so many of us have these stories. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's not heavy. It's not light, but it is necessary. And Trymaine, I've got to ask you, reporter to reporter, how do you process the grief? How do you process the trauma, the proximity to trauma and violence when it comes to the stories that you cover? How do you process that in a healthier way now, especially given your bloodline? You just talked about how generations and generations of Black men in your own family have been the victims of gun violence and other forms of violence. As a Black man, I know very well, the head trip that can put you on in terms of thinking about your own longevity and your own mortality. And so talk to us about how do you process in a healthier way?
For a very long time, I wasn't doing it in a healthy way, and I wasn't addressing it at all. And I was doing what so many of us were doing as a young reporter. I was pouring myself into the work even more. I'm hanging out late and drinking. We're chasing things. We're just running. We're doing everything but engaging with what we're actually carrying and naming it and finding ways to process it. It took nearly dying and really engaging what it was that I was carrying to find new ways to process it in real time. And so for me, it's meditation and breathing, taking 10 minutes to center myself, and honestly, just breathing, right? Being sure to always remember that everything is going to be all right. I would stress. Now, you wouldn't see it. If you knew me, you wouldn't see me stressing, but it's in my sleep. I just wouldn't sleep, man. I'd be tossing and turning all night. During the day, I'm cool. Let's get it done. I'm doing all these things as we do as Black men. We're masking it. I'm good and I'm good. And doing all that now. So it's naming it. It's processing in real time. It's meditation. Also finding, like, this sounds corny, but like healthy hobbies. Man, I be out there fishing, bro. I fish every chance I get because I'm out there connecting with myself in nature, as opposed to just meeting you at the bar. I mean, I'm still gonna meet you at the bar, right? But finding healthy ways, man, because this is killing us. Because again, for Black men, it's for younger Black men, the leading cause of death is gun violence. For older Black men, it's cardiovascular disease and heart disease and high blood pressure and diabetes. We got to find ways to be honest with ourselves. And again, finding healthy ways to process. So now I'm very intentional, and that nothing matters but my health. Zero things matter. And so as we start to, get our list of priorities together, it's not just your family. It's not just your job. You have to center yourself in this, because we have to be around to be around.
We got to be around to be around. That's right. This book, 1,000 Ways to Die. Again, it's one of Trymaine's most personal works yet. It's a narrative reckoning with the generational toll of violence on Black families, including his own. When we come forward, we want to shift gears, and we want to shift away from the page onto the screen to talk about Trymaine's latest documentary, Hope in High Water. It's a people's recovery 20 years after Hurricane Katrina. It is another marvelous work that meets the moment. We're in conversation with Trymaine Lee, author of 1,000 Ways to Die. More when we come forward.
The audience is listening. Thought-provoking, eye-opening, heart-rendering. This is where authentic voices meet powerful discussions on culture, community, and change. This is where Black voices matter. He's breaking boundaries, amplifying diverse perspectives, and tackling the issues that matter most to you. You're inside A More Perfect Union with Dr. Nii-Quartelai on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Amber Payton with BIN News Now. Black Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser is signing an executive order requiring ongoing coordination with federal law enforcement as Trump's federalization of the city's police expires next week.
The mayor's order does not extend the Trump emergency.
Bowser says it creates a path forward beyond the emergency. President Trump praised her on Truth Social while criticizing other Democrats. Black R&B singer Montel Jordan says his prostate cancer has returned nearly a year after surgery. Known for his hit, This Is How We Do It, he remains hopeful, urging early detection and regular screening. He's also partnering with Zero Prostate Cancer and working on a documentary about his journey. Rapper Fat Joe gave away backpacks and school supplies to more than 500 kids at Paint for Peace Children's Village in Harlem, New York. He joins artists like Lil Baby, who also hosted a back-to-school event this summer. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Irvine 405 southbound Sam Canyon, they're clearing a crash out of the right lane, overall slowing from Jamboree. On the northbound side of the 405, this is at Culver Drive. Another wreck has been reported at the Culver off-ramp with a slow drive getting away from just about the 133 freeway. A wreck in Southgate, 710 northbound Imperial Highway. Everyone's off to the shoulder. That drive loading up away from Rosecrans. Echo Park, we're getting word of a wreck on the South 101 Glendale Boulevard off-ramp. Delays from Sunset.
Got issues with youth or high school sports? Positive Coaching Alliance can help. PCA, a national nonprofit, offers more than 1,000 free online resources for youth and high school sports coaches, parents, students, and administrators. Visit PCADevZone.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The impressive run for Venus Williams at the U.S. Open tennis tournament came to an end. The 45-year-old Compton native lost in the quarterfinals of the doubles competition. Venus and Leylah Fernandez lost to Taylor Townsend and Katerina Siniakova 6-1 and 6-2. This was the first time Venus competed in the U.S. Open in 2 years. She was also the oldest competitor in the U.S. Open women's bracket since 1981. After the match, the sellout crowd gave Venus a standing ovation. Just in case you're wondering, the 7-time Grand Slam champion gave no indication that she's ready to retire. Alabama A&M is the HBCU team that played in front of the largest crowd Saturday during the first full weekend of college football. Alabama A&M played at Arkansas, a game that drew 70,827 fans. The turnout ensures at least a six-figure payout for Alabama A&M from the gate receipts. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Break out the champagne. Everybody get a glass.
Tavis Smiley is now ranked number 16 nationally and the highest rated talk show hosted by an African American on the 2025 Talkers Heavy 100 list of the most important talk radio hosts in the nation. Last year, Tavis ranked number 33 and the year before, number 45. The Tavis Smiley Show has rapidly expanded its national syndication to now include nearly 50 radio stations across the country and counting. Congratulations, Tavis.
Yeah.
Imagine a world without heart disease and stroke, where every person has the chance to live a full and healthy life. Join us for a walk to save lives at the American Heart Association's Greater Los Angeles Heart and Stroke Walk, Saturday, September 20th at the Rose Bowl. Every step made and every dollar raised means more people learning CPR, more life-saving research, and more time with the ones we love. Sign up at heartwalkla.org. The LA Heart and Stroke Walk is sponsored by Optum, UCLA Health, Keck Medicine of USC, and Dignity Health.
Are you ready to be a part of the conversation that will help shape our nation's future? Get ready to join us for the Left Coast Forum, Saturday, October 25th at LA Trade Tech, where progressive voices will come together to tackle the issues that matter most to working families across Los Angeles and beyond. From economic justice to climate action, from healthcare to housing, we're bringing together the brightest minds and most passionate advocates for real solutions and real change. With workshops, 2 major keynote addresses, and a closing reception with great music and good food. It's the Left Coast Forum, where your voice matters and your ideas take action. Saturday, October 25th at LA Trade Tech. Brought to you by KBLA Talk 1580 and the LA Progressive. The future won't wait, and neither should you. Mark your calendar now to be there and be heard. Stay tuned to KBLA Talk 1580 for more details.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio that's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Hit me!
National news of consequence, informed opinion, and analysis beyond the headlines. You're listening to A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai, and you're looking at, if you're streaming, Trymaine Lee, MSNBC contributor, author of a new book that comes out September 9th called 1,000 Ways to Die. And as if he's not busy enough, He's a film coming out, a docu coming out. It's called, or it's already out, Hope in High Water, A People's Recovery, 20 years after Hurricane Katrina. Trymaine, you were on the ground in New Orleans covering this story 20 years ago. How are you remembering Hurricane Katrina, and how has that memory served as the foundation for this film?
20 years sounds crazy to even say. You know, I was just a young reporter coming from Philly. I was only in New Orleans for about 4 months when Hurricane Katrina happened. And so I hold in my hands two different pieces of the storm. On one is a lot of the hurt and pain and desperation. People were abandoned in that city. And people showed remarkable courage in the face of what was this, just being left alone in the city. It's hard to even articulate it because how the memories are still so fresh in my mind. The smell, the water of folks coming in from all parts of the city looking for food. The number of people who died, the bodies. But on the other side, there was this amazing shared humanity and community that I witnessed during the storm. And every time I go back, I've been looking for that same thing, right? That sound was so people who showed up for each other in ways that the systems couldn't, that the politicians couldn't, right? And so 20 years later, even though a lot of the conversation is essentially a recitation on the destruction, I wanted to highlight those folks who are stepping up to heal their city, to patch their city when everything else failed. And so we're looking through the lens of maternal health, the environment, peace and safety, environmental justice and education, and access to food, and showing how folks are building bridges into the future despite everything they've experienced. And so this is another one of those works that I think it just reframes how we're viewing not just the events of Hurricane Katrina, but the people and the power that folks have. And it was just an honor, honestly, and a privilege to come back and give those folks their flowers.
I mean, and the fact that you remember these folks, I mean, there are a lot of stories that we cover, and you don't always have the ability to go back and visit, 20 years later and to learn how people are really doing. Talk to us about what you found in going back to New Orleans and visiting with the survivors of Hurricane Katrina. What did you find that was at odds with some of the dominant narratives and dominant stories and reporting that we've seen come out of New Orleans since Katrina?
I think it's the deep resolve of the people. I think that there's this, and there was some language that folks were using describing people as looters and refugees, as there were just this mass of aliens, right? This alien mass of humanity who were violent and dangerous, and who had to be kept in the city as long as possible so everyone else can get out. Lest we forget that folks were trying to cross the bridge and the neighboring police department was firing over their heads, or the treatment at the Superdome, or the treatment by police. But what has always been at odds with that narrative is that people were doing everything they could to not just survive, but help their neighbors survive. And I think that's the part. And I'm reminded time and again from folks on the ground that it's not about resilience. We like to use that word resilience. And a sister described to me in New Orleans that resilience is a bending and bending and bending until you almost break. And that resiliency is not a natural state, right? And so it's not about being resilient to the forces. It's having a resolve to stand strong in your community and do everything that you can. And I think there's a harnessing of great agency that I found that is not just refreshing, but I saw the same thing when I was there the first time. When young men were breaking into the drugstores to get drugs for the elderly, when folks were breaking into the supermarkets to get food to feed the hungry, when folks were showing beautiful small acts of grace and kindness, of covering a body, of tying a body to a front porch so it doesn't wash away. Acts of grace in the face of what could be insurmountable tragedy and pain, a literal flood and a figurative flood of anguish and pain. Yet still, these communities are standing strong. They're literally, and this is one of my favorite parts of the whole documentary. We follow a young sister named John Shell. And John Shell works for a place called Grow Dat Farm. And so she's literally with her hand in the soil, teaching a new generation of people how to grow their own food in a community that, you know, there's obscene food scarcity, right? People don't have access to fresh foods. But John Shell, who was a child during Katrina, remembered what those days were like and returning, and that they didn't have access to a supermarket. So she started getting into the neighborhood garden, Lower Ninth Ward, and now she works at Grow That. I love that, like literally and figuratively, with your hands back in the soil and feeding the community with your own hands. Those are the kind of stories that I'm telling in Hope and High Water.
And one of the things I really love about this docu-series is that it's forward-looking. You know, there are a lot of documentarians, there are a lot of journalists, you know, that succumb to the possibility, the quite frankly, the high likelihood, you know, of producing trauma porn, right? And really wallowing in the trauma of the people, you know, as opposed to, you know, really documenting how folks made a way out of no way. Talk to us about, you know, how you got everybody on board to say, okay, folks, as much as we could do a look back and, you know, we could, you know, retell these tragic stories, you know, we are going to stick to producing a forward-looking documentary that highlights the voices of everyday residents in New Orleans.
Here's the beauty of this situation. This is my first independent film. So I decided what was going to go in the film and what was not going to go in the film. I had an amazing director named Jaime Asifa, director and producer, who is brilliant and bad. My director of photography, Ernesto Guadalupe. The first time I've had a majority Black crew of directors, producers, cinematographers, all Black all day. People who cared about this community. And so the opportunity to do something that honored the people, honored our people, was always paramount, and it was always center. We did a screening in New Orleans, our premiere screening, and it was a community event at a community cultural center. And so they had the room was packed, there was an overflow room, and the response that we got after, a woman said, you know, my family, we've been avoiding any of this coverage because it triggers us, but I can have my grandmother watch this. I can have my mother watch this. I can have my children watch this. And that to me is the highest praise, that people are affirmed. Every story cannot affirm. Some stories are too ugly. We want to, you know, cast our eyes aside. But to create something, especially for Hurricane Katrina, given how there's a lot of noise and a lot of great filmmakers, a lot of important stories being told right now. But again, we're steeped in the worst days of people's lives. Yeah. But I wanted to highlight the emergence from that. And I love, and that's the saying I said, you kind of said this earlier, making a way where there was none, or you make the road by walking it. And the people of New Orleans made this road by walking it in some pretty beautiful ways, despite everything against them.
You know, Trymaine, you mentioned that this represents really the worst day of the lives of so many folks, yourself included. You were a witness. You saw things that no human being should see. You know, on a very personal level, how was the making of this film a healing for you?
In so many ways it was. I mean, I always feel so thankful and blessed to have emerged from that event on stronger legs. But I always recognized that I was a transplant there. My family didn't live there. I wasn't worried about my mother or my grandmother, my uncles and aunts and them. So I was only tasked with telling the story. So whatever I experienced pales in comparison to what the people experienced. And so as bad as it was for me, I always tried to keep my eyes set on that this is, you know, the people's story, and it's my job to help amplify that. But with that being said, you know, I certainly, especially looking back, coming out of Katrina and seeing what I saw, definitely experienced some trauma. And I was definitely, again, not coping the most healthy ways at that time. I'll say that as a young man. And so all these years later, being able to focus on this side of the story, I think it is kind of cathartic in so many ways. But I was always committed. And even when I was young, before I had full command of my skill set, I was trying to do this kind of work I'm doing now. I was trying to recenter the lens and trying to humanize, which I hate that verbiage, by the way, that we have to humanize humans. I hate it, but it's real in America. We have to remind people that Black people are humans, full human beings, right? But so what I was trying to do then, I've been able to do throughout my career. So 20 years later, and to breathe life and speak to life, right? And have people tell their stories and amplify the stories of not just how they've survived, but in so many ways how they are thriving. That is not to sugarcoat the situation in New Orleans, because New Orleans has a lot of issues. It's not to pretend there's been more progress than has been made, because there should be more progress, right? You go to a lower ninth ward, you still see those ghost steps leading to nothing, where people haven't been able to return. But even in spite of all that people are feeding people, the children, that people are helping new mothers bring life into a very tough world, but helping walk them through to the most healthy life possible, that folks are fighting in Mississippi for the literal ground beneath their feet, from the encroachment of big industry and the erosion of the coastline, right? That folks are fighting and standing strong, and it's all culturally informed and trauma informed. And those folks closest to the issues have the solutions. And so that's an honor, and that is cathartic, and that is healing.
Well, it is an honor to be in conversation with you. We have a lot of colleagues in this business, and when people would ask me, what are the types of stories that you want to tell, and what kind of journalist are you exactly? And I oftentimes talk about the work of so many people who have served as an inspiration, yourself included. For people to know, Trymaine Lee he's the real deal. He's the real deal. He's really about the community. He's really about this life. And you can feel it on the page when you are reading his new book, 1,000 Ways to Die. And you can see it on the screen when you watch Hope in High Water, A People's Recovery 20 years after Hurricane Katrina. You make me proud to be a journalist. And I wish you well as your tour begins. And we're encouraging everybody who is listening to this conversation, who is streaming this conversation, run, don't walk, to pick up 1,000 Ways to Die. It's required reading to meet this moment. And then where can people go to watch Hope in High Water?
Hope in High Water is available on Peacock. It's streaming now and forever. Check it out. But also, brother, I want to say you are amongst our brightest lights, man. And so it's an honor to be here on your platform. But every time I see you, I want to show you love, man, because you are, you're brilliant and you're bold and you're about that life, brother. So thank you for allowing me, a few moments on your platform. Seriously.
It's an honor. It's an honor. You've been listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. Our thanks to author and journalist Trymaine Lee.
Thank you, brother.
Striving to make America a nation as good as its promise. This is A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm LA City Councilmember Curran Price, inviting you to the 30th anniversary of the Central Avenue Jazz Festival, Saturday, September the 20th, from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. We've got 4 pavilions, 3 stages of live music, plus food, fun, and a marketplace all along historic Central Avenue between MLK Boulevard and Vernon Ave. Our featured acts this year are Gregory Porter, Pancho Sanchez, and Jasmine Horn at the 30th anniversary of the Central Avenue Jazz Festival, Saturday, September 20th, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. along Central Avenue between MLK Boulevard and Vernon Avenue. Come out and bring the whole family because this legendary celebration is free. For more information, go to centralavjazzfest.com. I'm LA Councilmember Curran Price, and I absolutely approve this message.
September is World Alzheimer's Month, a time to shine a light on a public health crisis that deeply impacts Black families. 1 in 5 Black adults ages 70 and older is living with Alzheimer's disease, or AD, and the risk is twice as high compared to white adults. But AD isn't just forgetting a name or losing track of time. Signs of early AD could be repeating questions, missing appointments, or struggling with bills and daily tasks. These things aren't a normal part of aging. Here's the good news. Treatments are available that may help if AD is diagnosed early. If you notice changes in memory or daily routines, whether in yourself or a loved one, don't wait. Early diagnosis and intervention are key to managing AD effectively. To learn more about AD and a potential treatment option, visit treatallsearly.com. That's treatalzearly.com to learn more about the signs and symptoms and a potential treatment option. This message is brought to you by AZI.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Imagine a Los Angeles where everyone can thrive, where communities have access to the resources they need to succeed. That's the vision of Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. They're dedicated to improving life in LA County by providing educational support, employment assistance, and spaces for community engagement. By 2050, they want LA to be the best place to connect, create, learn, live, and play. They're working toward an education system that's well-resourced and culturally responsive, becoming a hub for artists and innovators, and making sure everyone has access to healthy food, quality healthcare, and safe housing. It's about building a future where we all have the chance to succeed. We invite you to learn more about their mission and get involved with Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Notable journalists, industry leaders, lawmakers, change makers, tastemakers, and you working to build a more perfect union on KBLA Talk 1580.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai, and before we get to the quiet part out loud, I just want to remind you all that the Left Coast Forum is returning to Los Angeles Saturday, October 25th, 2025. KBLA Talk 1580 is working with LA Progressive and a number of other progressive organizations from the region that are collaborating to gather and really reprise the much admired Left Coast forums that were held pre-COVID in 2017 and 2018. I think two major keynote addresses, panel sessions sponsored by a wide range of progressive activists and groups on key issues of the day. And so mark your calendars for Saturday, October 25th. Activists throughout Southern California and across the country are going to be right here. And so go ahead and do that. Before we let you go, we want to lean into a little bit of history. We've been talking a lot about Louisiana, especially 20 years after Hurricane Katrina. But there's a 45-year-old case that is worth noting. What one man's 45-year-old case tells us about Jim Crow juries haunting Louisiana. You see, as reported by ProPublica, today a split verdict would mean a mistrial, but in 1980s Louisiana, when non-unanimous juries were still legal, 19-year-old Lloyd Gray, a black man, was sentenced to prison for life, even though the only two black jurors had voted not guilty. You see, Gray was just 19 in 1980 when he was tried in a New Orleans courtroom on a charge of aggravated rape. After one day of testimony, the jury returned with a 10-2 split verdict. The 10 white jurors voted guilty and only 2 black jurors not guilty. And if you're a regular consumer of courtroom dramas, you might think a split verdict would mean a mistrial. And guess what? Today it would. But back then in Louisiana, where non-unanimous juries were legal, it resulted in a life sentence for Mr. Gray. Covering the criminal justice system in Louisiana, it often means having to familiarize yourself with things that people in other parts of the country might find shocking. For instance, many might be surprised to learn that in Louisiana for more than 120 years, the state allowed people like Gray to be sent to prison for life, even though 2 jurors voted not guilty. The only other state to do the same was Oregon. That brings me to 2020, when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the practice was unconstitutional and based on an inherently racist law that was meant to uphold white supremacy, but the decision only applied in cases going forward. The court left the decision about what to do with those convicted long ago to the states. And guess what Louisiana did? They refused to reconsider the convictions of more than 1,000 mostly black men sent to prison for lengthy sentences by those split jury verdicts. Yeah, that happened here. And so when we talk about reforming our criminal justice system, when we talk about the disparities that exist in sentencing, this is what we're talking about. This is the history that we're all working so hard to correct. And it's worth correcting. It's worth correcting. The Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Corrections, of course, they've denied requests for interviews about this. And I think that they should say something about it. Because maybe in responding to this, we can actually acknowledge what happened and the need to correct it. But that's likely not going to happen. But don't be deterred. I think the other side wants us to be deterred in this moment. I hope by sharing the story, it reminds you why it's important for us to do what we can from where we are with what we have. Don't stop. Don't stop. We'll have to leave it there. My thanks to the entire village that helps us produce a more perfect union each and every day. Our executive producer, Tava Smiley, our sound engineer, brother Andy, to our show producers, Faraji and Art and Journey, and of course, to each and every one of you, all of our leaders, learners, and listeners. We curate this show each and every day with you in mind. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai Corte, and you've been listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union right here on KBLA Talk 1580.